the first investment we made was in a towing company. And how we knew that was the right individual was we had a conversation about, why he was interested in this particular business, what he wanted out of the transaction. And there's certainly financial gain, when you're acquiring a business. You wouldn't be taking the risk. You wouldn't be, PGing debt. You wouldn't be doing everything that you need to do in order if there wasn't a financial return. But if you're doing it only for the financial return, I think you're going to be sorely mistaken and unhappy. And the first thing out of his mouth was, I want to drive the tow truck in the Main Street parade. And what that means to me is he wants to be part of the community. When we talk about building Main Street, that's building Main Street. That's, he wants to drive the tow truck in the 4th of July parade. That's pretty cool. That's being part of the community. That's building a local economy. So when people send their dollars, people invest with us. It's not going to the coast. It's not going to, New York businesses or San Francisco or anything. It's going to like Toledo, Ohio, where I think this business is out of, Richmond, Virginia, or, my business is in Charlotte, North Carolina. It's middle America. It's Main Street. And that's what I love about this. And to a person, like the people that we backed, they're all in on that long-term perspective.
It's Marketing's Fault, the podcast where we discuss how to do marketing the right way. I'm your host, Eric Rutherford, and I am thrilled today because I have with me Kevin Biebelhausen. He is an investor and a business owner. He frequently consults on digital strategy and operations. He is a sought-after conference speaker, frequent podcast guest, and author. Also, he is the author of Capitalism for Humans. Make sure to check it out on Substack. I'll make sure the link is in the show notes. Kevin, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Eric. Happy to be here.
It is my pleasure. Now, we're going to get into small businesses. We're going to get into marketing. We're going to get into a lot of good stuff with Fruition Capital. But we got to start with opera singing, right? We just need to start there because I know for everybody listening, you're like, where does opera come from? But yeah, it absolutely has an impact here. So what did you learn from studying and performing opera that helps you in the business world today?
At the time, it's funny. Things kind of come full circle. I started out, I have 2 degrees in music. I went and I got a bachelor's degree in music and vocal performance, and gigged around for a little bit, and then was able to, I was on scholarship there, and then got a scholarship and assistantship to go to university and get my master's degree and kind of sing and go and do auditions and try and do local gigs and everything. That's fine when you're obviously young and you don't have, a lot of expenses and you kind of think, you've got the world by the tail. It's very hard to make a living in that. But I'll tell you what, man, like I learned a ton doing opera and music performance as a business owner. Now, looking back, I can see so many of the seeds that were planted. Specifically, like as a musician, you're the CEO of your own career. And that's much the same as if you're an entrepreneur. There's no difference. It's just how you're plying your trade, So when I was, I would, have different, you have marketing efforts, you have technical work that you're doing. You are collaborating with people. There's all kinds of stuff that, tick, 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 tick. It's all the same. Those skills are so translatable. And so I found that the transition from music into business I ended up getting a corporate job in healthcare and spent the majority of my career in healthcare and mostly in the technology function. And I was able to make that pivot because of the collaborative skills that I had learned in music. And I started in sales and then kind of worked my way into technology. I wasn't afraid of getting into complex subjects. So, for instance, like when I took a job at a healthcare software company and was able to teach myself, Linux systems, SQL databases, things like that, because I had taken, at that point, how many semesters of music theory that like, if I can get through, Schenkerian analysis and all this really difficult, augmented 6-chord nonsense, then I'm pretty sure I can figure out how relational databases work. So it really was just, we were talking before we even started this about the generalist versus specialist. I kind of enjoy really being that generalist and being able to tackle, a lot of different topics, using the same kind of skills, that I built over my career.
And I think that that is so true. Like if you can do music theory, oh my word, if you can do like heavy duty music theory, you can do anything. Like you can
Yeah.
do anything because some of that stuff is whoo.
Yeah.
That's heavy duty, but kind of in the same boat though. I have often heard and seen the benefit of music and math or
Yeah.
music and systems, like they work in tandem to almost make each side improve as you work on both of them. Have you seen that?
Yeah, that's so interesting that so certainly music and math are related and people talk about that often. And I think one of the with like the pet stories that people tell are, when IBM was recruiting a lot of software developers in its early days, well, there weren't a lot of computer science departments. What departments did they pull from? Math, music, harder sciences. But it's just always interesting when you look at the people that they hired a lot of musicians because of the ability to digest complex information and synthesize it. This systems piece is also incredibly interesting and something that I might explore more because you're 100% right. All music has a form and and a structure to it. And there's in my current business now, I'm running a textile company, and I often kind of talk to my designers who are musicians of a different flavor, right? Artists of another kind, about the beauty of creativity that comes from being within a structure. You have constraints, and the real magic comes is when you're able to work within those constraints and create something beautiful. Um, and whether it's a price point that we're trying to hit in our current company, or whether it's a specific market that we're trying to sell into, whatever the constraint is. In music, it's you need to do sonata allegro form, and it needs to be this pattern, and here's what here's how many measures this the part A has, and here's how many measures the secondary theme has. It's very true, and I think the true genius of somebody shows up in how they work within those constraints and how they make the best of that situation.
And I think that's so true. I think when I was younger, I didn't see the benefit of constraints,
Yeah,
because I was arrogant and I knew
yeah,
everything, obviously. Um, and so then I went through the school of hard knocks and experienced what that's like. But constraints really focus you. They
mm,
give you that sort of, they give you the boundaries to work in. So whether you're programming, whether
hmm
you're doing textiles, because again, you're talking patterns, you're talking texture, you're talking a variety of different things, price points, all of that.
hmm
You've got supply, demand, you've got anchoring, you've got all these fabulous uh, layers that you can do. So I love it. I do. Um, well, let me jump in then and ask, because I want to get into small businesses as well. But
yeah.
first, let's talk about Fruition Capital. What is Fruition Capital?
Fruition Capital is an entity that we formed. It's a fund that we look to use to invest in small business acquisitions throughout the U.S. So how this whole thing got started was as I just mentioned, I own a textile business. Well, I didn't start the textile business. I bought the textile business. So I'm what they would call like a corporate burnout. So as I did my music career, and then I did my normal corporate career for about 10 years, well, 10 plus years. And then after I got kind of burned out after COVID, I was working in healthcare and technology. Both of, so technology in COVID was obviously very critical because we were all in a virtual world. So it was stressful, difficult. I ended up having my own health issue because of COVID. So it was time for a change. And I had always wanted to own my own business. And I was obsessed with this idea of buying a business because you hear so much about the risks of a startup and, oh, how many businesses fail. And I really liked the idea of being able to take over somebody's company who's a retiring entrepreneur, like the guy I bought from is in his late 60s, retiring entrepreneur, immediate cash flow in the business, and sort of this nice platform that you're able to right the ship a little bit, get it looking the way you want it to, and then scale it. Um, and there's now a whole ecosystem that has popped up around this idea. But in 2017, there wasn't a lot of information. I found the Harvard Business Review Guide to Buying Small Businesses. That's, very SEO title. And I fell in love with the idea of, I read about this guy buying a porta potty business. I'm like, that's the coolest thing. I want to do that. Like, I don't want to be, creating the next dating app or, building a social media site or doing something in Silicon Valley. I want to own that business. Everybody needs that business, right? So I really liked that idea. And, textiles far cry from porta potty business. I still had to put my little artistic spin on it, and kind of get back to my music roots. But yeah, I mean, I bought this company, utilizing the same kind of framework that we look for at Fruition, which is basically going out and using an SBA loan, which is the Small Business Administration. So it's a federally backed loan. And then I raised equity from investors, and then was able to acquire this business and be the majority owner. Fruition Capital is basically the equity side of that equation. So we pool money from investors, just like any kind of private equity fund, and we invest alongside entrepreneurs who are interested in owning their own business, and then we take a piece of the equity, obviously, for our investors and cash flow and everything like that. So it's the thing that I'll say that makes us unique is that we're playing at a small end of the market. So typically I stay away from the private equity lingo, because that kind of calls to mind a much larger, more rigid, more corporate, identity. And we're in Main Street, like the business that I bought, it's not a huge business. These are micro cap businesses. We're talking $10 million and under in revenue. So large enough, certainly for a single person, but not private equity, not good targets for private equity that will come in with a ton of capital. So we're really, looking at, businesses that are between, like $1 million and $2 million in EBITDA. So proxy for cash flow, and to be able to invest alongside highly qualified entrepreneurs who are coming into this space from everywhere at this point. They're teaching it at business schools. They're teaching it all over the place. If you spend, a few minutes on the internet looking at, entrepreneurship through acquisition, you're going to turn up a ton of stuff. So it's actually a really exciting time to be part of this ecosystem that's grown so much since I got into it in 2017, 2018. And that's where Fruition is at its best, is that we are one of the first funds in this space, focused solely on the lower middle market and helping sustain legacies of these Main Street businesses by pairing them with qualified entrepreneurs.
So, I mean, this is fascinating. We could talk. We could go way down a rabbit hole here, and we might still. It's early, but the way you're looking at this, I like how you're talking about Main Street businesses. The porta potty is awesome. Everybody needs a porta potty. Whether you want them or not, you need them.
That's right.
Textiles, you need them as well. It's on the lower end of the spectrum. In terms of cash flow, I mean, in terms of total revenue, but still very viable businesses. So when people approach this, is this where they're looking to buy something and just build it for years? Are they looking to buy and, build it for 3 or 5 years and then turn around and sell? How's that? Or does it just depend?
It's a great question, because typical private equity, and when I would go up against private equity bidders and businesses, I would always kind of bash them because they have a reputation of flipping businesses. So you come in, you run it for 5 years, you kind of squeeze all the juice out of it, and then you flip it to the next private equity company who will put a bunch of debt on it and just wash, rinse, repeat. And there's been countless number of businesses that have gone through that process. A lot of them haven't survived. Because it's traumatic on the business to do that. So I say all that to say, we have a really long-term, and our entrepreneurs, our sponsors coming in have a very long-term vision for these businesses. We've not invested in one entrepreneur who, had the flipper mentality, to borrow from real estate. Everybody, the first investment we made was in a towing company, and how we knew that was the right individual was we had a conversation about, why he was interested in this particular business, what he wanted out of the transaction. And there's certainly financial gain, when you're acquiring a business. You wouldn't be taking the risk. You wouldn't be, PGing debt. You wouldn't be doing everything that you need to do in order if there wasn't a financial return. But if you're doing it only for the financial return, I think you're going to be sorely mistaken and unhappy. And the first thing out of his mouth was, I want to drive the tow truck in the Main Street parade. And what that means to me is he wants to be part of the community. When we talk about building Main Street, that's building Main Street. That's, he wants to drive the tow truck in the 4th of July parade. That's pretty cool. That's being part of the community. That's building a local economy. So when people send their dollars, people invest with us. It's not going to the coast. It's not going to New York businesses or San Francisco or anything. It's going to like Toledo, Ohio. Where I think this business is out of Richmond, Virginia, or my business is in Charlotte, North Carolina. Just it's middle America. It's Main Street, and that's what I love about this. And to a person, like the people that we backed, they're all in on that long-term perspective.
I love that. And that's good to hear, because that was kind of one of those, I was wondering how, because again, private equity, it's get in, get out, make what you can as quick as you can. But also it seems like too, different things I've read, it seems like there are more and more businesses sort of in this area where you have people entrepreneurs, they're getting to retirement age. I mean, are there a lot of businesses out there, or is this just like a few throughout the U.S.? What's your picture on that?
Oh, sure. Yeah. I mean, like the sort of marketing buzzword around it is everybody calls it the silver tsunami. There's, potentially, a couple $1 trillion of wealth that needs to be transferred, over the next decade. Because, a lot of these assets are run by baby boomers who are retiring. And now, do I think that all of that, that entire value will transfer? No. Most of those businesses will close because they're solo operators. They're more like, they're sole proprietor type businesses. So there are, it's not, so the number is often overblown, but that there's a ton of opportunity, like these businesses that are out there, that there's plenty of businesses, that make under $10 million or that do top line $10 million or under, and have, good, profitable, consistent, cash flow. And it's becoming more competitive as more people are interested in this space. But there's still meat on the bone. It's still early. And it's one of the last markets that's inefficient. It's kind of still the Wild West. And you have an opportunity to invest and make some pretty incredible gains, through these small businesses. Now, of course, there's risk associated with that, but that's kind of where the beauty of the fund comes in, where, when I raised capital for my deal before Fruition existed, I was taking, checks that were individually invested into my business. So all of their capital was in my company. With a fund, you can give me the same amount of money and I can spread it over 10 businesses. So you have much more of diversification within the fund than you would if you just wrote an individual check to somebody, right? That's why we wanted to do this, is because it was such a better deal for both the entrepreneur seeking capital and the investor who, doesn't necessarily, who can basically just put their diversification on autopilot and not have to necessarily worry about doing their own.
That's huge, because that's a really hard thing about investing in that capacity is, like you say, you write a check and you give it to somebody and you're like, I think they have what it takes to make this business work, but you just don't know. So that diversification is important.
Very important, and the thing there's, I think, two defining features. There's probably more, but two that are coming to mind right now as to why it's a good transaction for everybody involved and why both sides have some skin in the game. So if a sponsor brings a deal that we invest in, that sponsor is personally guaranteeing millions of dollars in debt. So they better be reasonably confident that they can make this deal work. and they're going to be the main owner operator. They're going to be the one in the CEO seat making the decisions, and of course reporting to a board that will have a seat on. But they're the main person. And the other thing is, like, our investment, they're all cash flowing businesses from day one. So instead of, compare it to venture capital, where, if anybody in your audience is familiar, I mean, you send them a check, right? And maybe in 7 years you'll see a return. But like, you don't get cash distributions. That's not how it works. They keep all the money in the fund, and then, there's a liquidity event, somebody goes public, somebody sells to a larger strategic, whatever, and there's a liquidity event and cash comes back. We distribute cash annually because our businesses kick off annual cash because they're profitable. It's a completely different, different model. And so we've attracted with the beating that the technology markets have taken over the last 18 months or so, we've picked up quite a few people who, are looking to greener pastures, commercial real estate, venture capital, things that have struggled. They're starting to look into small businesses like, I think this is a pretty interesting burgeoning asset class for us to consider. So we found a lot of success there talking with venture capital and commercial real estate investors.
Wow. So they come to you, they say, hey, I want to invest in your fund.
Mm-hmm.
And then
Yeah,
you works it out. So that's on the investment side. And
that's
then
right.
you have other people coming to you saying, hey, I have found this business, or I
That's
think
right.
this business has potential. I'm looking for funding. And then you just,
You got it. Yeah. Two-sided
wow,
marketplace.
I love it. I love it. And then, so what is the hardest thing to teach people about small business acquisition? Because I got to believe, even though it is becoming more popular, it's still not on a lot of people's radar. Some
Yep.
people think it's a small business, it's not going to make any money. I'm going to be working 80 hours a week, and I'm going to be making less than minimum wage. Like, what's the hardest thing to teach people about small business acquisition?
There's an answer for two different audiences. The answer for somebody who's buying the business is it's we get a lot of people who are interested in buying businesses from finance backgrounds. And if you have a finance background, you've probably had a lot of deal experience. You may have worked in investment banking or private equity or some finance function. And so they kind of know how to put a deal together, but they've never really managed people or operated a business. They've seen spreadsheets. They know what the P&L should look like. They know what the balance sheet should look like, but they've never had a closed door meeting with an employee and had to kind of have that heart to heart type meeting. They don't know what it takes on a day-to-day basis to be essentially the CEO, general manager. So getting that perspective, that's why I like the story I told before with the, driving the tow truck in the parade. Like, that's the right attitude to have. So when I get those, guys who think about it more as a financial transaction, you're really trying to show them the other side of the coin. Like, I'm not sure this is for you. If you want to make a ton of money, there's other ways to do that and not put yourself in, $5 million of debt to go buy this business. So that's on the buyer side. On the investor side, it's simply the fact that people don't know this exists. It's very new. It's been a very opaque market. Until recently, there haven't been investment funds like ours that have popped up to serve this specific market. Frankly, because the juice really wasn't worth the squeeze for some of these larger capital allocators, like these private equity firms. They were focused on the bigger businesses because they could raise all the, but private equity has become less efficient over time. It was funny. I was looking at a chart where, you could see how much leverage somebody would use in the 80s. And that was the main driver of value. Basically you just put a bunch of debt on a company and wait. That's so much. That's not what they do so much anymore. They don't lever it up as much. It's more about creating operational efficiencies, which is fancy for cost cutting and streamlining operations. But that's still true in the lower middle market. You can put a bunch of debt on a business, and through the SBA, you get a 10-year term note, and so you get access to a leverage profile that otherwise you wouldn't have. That provides awesome returns to investors. So it's a really nice asset class that's only getting more popular because people are starting to see as they become aware of it. And that's kind of why I'm doing some of these shows, right? Is to tell people that, hey, this is an option for your portfolio if you're interested. It's an option as an entrepreneur if you want, if you need access to capital to go out and buy a business, or it's an option as an investor if you just want to invest back into Main Street. This is a vehicle through which to do it.
You also mentioned just the general inefficiencies that are part of this. Is that just from, I mean, is it just the whole process? Is it finding businesses? Is it the financing? What makes it inefficient?
Financing has gotten a lot better, but it really is. It's a lot about finding a deal. And I mean, a perfect example is so every deal that you look at, and there's marketplaces, there's biz buy sell, and then there's all the brokers, there's national brokers like Transworld, or like VR, Viking. There's a couple names that people may or may not know. It's not super important. It's just that these are all non-associated entities, and they've all got their own way of doing things. And you got to sign an NDA for every business that you look at, right? Here's just one example. Well, that NDA could be, 8 pages long sometimes with onerous terms in it, but it's a different NDA for each deal because you're looking at how many different brokers, right? And so there's no one real platform to manage it all. It takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of time to go through all that stuff. And if you're one person, it's very hard to do. And it takes somebody who's pretty much dedicated full time, that maybe even has some overseas help, with a lot of the administrative work. So really it's more about like the access to the deals and finding a broker who is worth their salt, that you can actually work with, a reasonable seller, somebody that doesn't want public market valuations for a business that, does less than $1 million in EBITDA. They think they can trade at 30 times. And like, well, that's not the way this market works. But their accountant told them that 10 years ago. So that's what they think, is normal. It's a lot about education, and yeah, we find ourselves doing that, pretty often. And I'm working on several deals right now personally. And it's, that doesn't change even though you've acquired a business and you're looking at the next one. Like you still got to re-educate people. You still got to go through all the steps in qualifying the business, and, slogging through all the paperwork, and you're dealing with people, right? People are inefficient. There's not a lot of systems in place.
Well, too, and it seems like as just having to validate every offer, like every offer isn't a good cash flow opportunity.
That's right.
Right.
That's right.
So you really have to do the validation. So you might
right.
look at 10 or 20 and there may be one.
Yeah.
So that has to be, I don't know, exhausting. I don't know.
Yeah, you can feel like you're spinning your wheels for sure. And it does get frustrating for people, especially, when they submit offers and then they get outbid, but they're outbid, they submit 5 offers and they're outbid on every single one. I've seen it happen. And, God bless those people that continue kind of pushing forward. It's tough to get that, to get that close so far, so often, and to just not, make contact with the ball. You just kind of keep swinging and missing. And that's just getting the deal under what we call LOI, letter of intent. Then you have to actually get to close. That's a whole other thing, right? Then you actually, it's not just kicking the tires. It's opening up the hood and taking a look at the engine, and, looking at all the maintenance history and all, everything that just like you're buying a car or a house or whatever, you're doing the same thing with the business and spending cash. And oftentimes deal will blow up and you'll be out the money. So there's a risk there. Absolutely.
But it sounds like on the other side, there is the opportunity to do some, to acquire a business that you like, that you want to be engaged with, that helps a local area. You mentioned earlier too about this idea of, and I've read some about too, just this idea of operational efficiency,
Mm.
where you're going in and maybe they haven't updated anything in 20 years, 25 years. They're still using DOS for whatever their bookkeeping software. I mean, it's
Do you have
ancient
a
or
camera
whatever.
in my office out there? Because that's exactly, yeah, that's exactly, I mean, it's 100% our situation. So we're working on a system that was built in the 80s. And we're going through, so like in the intro and everything, you talked about digital operations and strategy. Like, yeah, that's a huge part of operational efficiency. Like getting some tools in here. So we don't have to do everything so manually. Our accounting until middle of last year. So I bought the business in January, and by June we had transitioned to QuickBooks. But before that, all the accounting was done in manually. It was dumped out of our old
Wow.
AS400 system and manipulated in Excel and done manually. And for a business that's doing, let's say $10 million top line, with a lot of transactions, it was a huge beast for any bookkeeper to keep up with.
Oh my
So yeah,
word.
I
That
mean,
would
you were
take
talking.
like
I mean,
all month just to balance the books, like to close out
yeah,
every
it took
month. It would
it
almost.
took it took over 2 weeks for sure to close. For sure. Yeah, oftentimes longer. Yep, yep. So that's just a little
So if
taste. That's why it's a market that you can generate a lot of upside in, is because you can come in and you can spend a little bit of money and with a little bit of know-how, and you can implement these systems, and all of a sudden, your employees are free to do higher level tasks because you've removed sort of the lowest rung of tasks that they have to do, and you've just automated it, or you've made their life easier with some software. Um, that's been a huge thing.
Well, and two, it sounds like, and I'm sure there's some education that goes with it as well, because as you make it more efficient, it's not like you're removing headcount.
No.
As you said, you're just letting these people now work on things that matter more,
Yeah,
as
100%.
opposed to I have to run for 3 days. I'm running spreadsheets, like,
Yep.
or I'm copying, like it's total manual stuff, so they can actually do like important stuff.
Stuff that only they can do. That only,
Yeah.
yeah. And so I steal this phrase from healthcare. I think it applies pretty much to everywhere in life, but especially in business ownership. Like, I want people to be working at the top of their licensure, which means, as a physician, I want you to be doing things only a physician can be doing. As a nurse, I want you to be doing things only a nurse can be doing. And then we have ancillary support staff to do the other things that we don't need, that are lower value tasks, and somebody else can do that. So we want you to be operating at your highest and best level. Same thing in operating a company. You want people to be, you don't want them, kind of in the not in the weeds, but dealing with menial kind of repetitive tasks that can otherwise just be automated or even offshored. If you bring on an offshore resource, they can take away a lot of that burden until you're ready to automate it. But that's 100% right. It's working at the top of your licensure.
So then you're gaining efficiency. Do
Mhm.
you also then have to figure out how, from a sales marketing standpoint, how to market the business better, or are they, because they are sort of main street businesses, you've got, I don't know, a 30-year track record, like everybody knows who they are? Is there a marketing aspect of it, or is it more just the efficiency?
Well, now we can turn this into a coaching session because it's something I'm going through right now. I mean, seriously. So, I mean, the answer is it depends on the business that you buy. So it's very common right now for people to go in and buy home service businesses. So think HVAC, plumbing, electrical, pest control, that kind of stuff. Those are very popular. Those businesses you can run Google ads for. You can, do review campaigns. You can, it's a little bit. You could do cold calling. You can hand out leaflets. There's all the sort of like blocking and tackling of basic marketing there is applicable. For my business, we're more in the second camp of what you said. It's like we've been around for 25 years. We're completely B2B. Marketing looks a lot different for my company than it does my friend's HVAC company. It's a different clientele. He's going direct to, homeowners. I'm going to businesses, and I'm a supplier for businesses. So it doesn't make sense for me to go out there and like, and market in the same way as one of my customers down the line would. We're selling to different people. So we're actively working on that right now, and how to market as a B2B, very far up the supply chain entity. It's difficult. It's very difficult.
It is, and that's a whole different. I mean, that's a whole different creature.
Hmm.
Because like you say, HVAC, any of those, it's very direct to
Right.
consumer. But B2B is different. It's all about. I mean, you get some SEO involved, you get some content involved, so that people who are looking, you're speaking to buyers, you're speaking to executives. It's a different level of information that you're trying to communicate. You're trying to communicate speed,
Yep.
quality,
Yep.
efficiency, all of those good things.
It's kind of authority building, right? And just kind of
Yeah.
reinforcing the reputation of your business. So like, we have a great reputation, but we didn't have any real, I mean, we weren't doing any marketing at
Mm-hmm.
Heritage Fabrics, the business I bought. So I started doing a little bit of social. I started doing, we're trying to write some content out there to just draw people to the site that I built, to let people know that we're moving into the next phase of the company, and that we've been a partner for 25 years, and we're going to be a partner for the next 25 years, and here's what that looks like, and you can rely on us for design guides, color advice, bringing new products to the market, things like that. But yeah, I found it to be it's a little bit more like building a personal brand. It's more
Mm-hmm.
authority. You want to do authority building.
It is. So just one tangent question. I know you said you're there in Charlotte. Are you selling outside the Charlotte area? Are you regional? Like, I didn't know
Mm.
where your footprint is.
Yeah, we're national. Actually, we
Okay.
sell some international, but
Okay.
maybe 5% of our business. Yeah, but we're
Okay.
mostly in the U.S., a little bit in Canada, then a little bit in Europe, and some in the Middle East.
Okay. That's awesome. Cause
Yeah,
that's a whole, I mean, that if you're only like the wrecker company, like that's
right.
a local thing. That's a very local thing. Whereas you guys, that it's just a
Just
different
you're
marketing
100%
angle.
right. I've had that conversation just this week with somebody who was interested in. They were comparing two businesses. One was a service business that's geographically restricted, and the other was a business that had a national presence. So one isn't right or wrong. It's just, what do you want out of this company? Do you want to kind of be the player in a geographic region, or do you want to have a bit bigger of a sandbox to play in and be more of a national player? Just depends.
And it very much sounds like just exactly like what you were saying. It's building that authority. So
Yeah.
as these people buy these businesses, they have the opportunity to really build that business brand and take it beyond what it was.
Right.
Not because it was bad, it was great, but now it's like, okay, we're just going to move it into, I don't know, the next phase, so to
Right.
speak.
Yeah. If you buy it and you don't have a plan for it, I'm not sure why you bought it. Right. It's, you gotta, what you're planning to do something to it. And usually people that are buying these businesses they're a little bit more, what you call digital natives. They're people in their 30s or 40s, sometimes late 20s, that are coming in to do this, that aren't afraid necessarily of some of the technology, that older folks, may be, where they didn't need it. Right. It was working the way it was working. So why would they change it? Why would they rock the boat? You know, me coming in, there's a lot of things I look at. I'm like, why would we do it that way? Well, it was making money. Why change it? But if I want to go a certain place, if I want to grow to a certain level, there's a certain kind of ceiling that the business has, just by way of systems and tools that we have. We can only get so high before we kind of break capacity. So we have to change some things in order to get sort of ready for the future.
It's true. And really that kind of ties into, I can see, especially for business buyers like yourself, for people wanting to do that, having that sort of a non financial background,
Mm.
opera singing, theater, English, whatever it is, like bringing that to bear, and even working in a bunch of different industries.
Mm.
That seems to, I mean, that would honestly, that's a strength versus what a weakness, I would think.
I've found it to be. I think, I've like I said, I spent time in music. I spent time in healthcare. I consulted for a couple different industries. I've done consumer electronics. I've done food and beverage. And it was all, and then I went and got my MBA, so I've kind of dabbled in a bunch of different things. And I feel like that's made me an overall better manager and leader. Because I can see, and also I've been an employee obviously for most of my career, and so I can identify and relate to employees that are out there that somebody who has been a business owner for a long time, that you can forget, you forget what it's like to what happens if your paycheck is delayed by a couple days. What happens if I just had an insurance company come back and say, oh, we weren't deducting enough from this person's check. They didn't sign up for XYZ. It's supposed to come together, so now we're going to have to take more money out of their check. Okay, well, that's a conversation that we need to have, and how do we do that and keep the employee? It's not a lot of money in my mind, but it could be to them. I remember what that's like. It wasn't so long ago. So I think having that experience too, where it's not like I'm the second generation owner, right? Like I didn't inherit the business from my father or, anything like that. Um, I think that my employees here have enjoyed the fact that, it wasn't too long ago I was in that seat.
It makes a difference. Like
Mm,
when you know, in like when health insurance goes up every year and you felt that pain because health insurance went up maybe more than like health insurance and uh it went up more than maybe your raise did.
hmm
So it's like those
hmm
are real. I mean, those are real things,
Yep.
and it there is an identification that with people that yeah, I'm sure a lot of I'll say a lot of entrepreneurs, maybe not that's a wrong word, but maybe business owners who have never, like you say,
Yeah.
been an employee. If they've never had a, if they're not think of traditional W-2 employee.
Yeah, sometimes this. I mean, I can see it in. So I'm in an industry in textiles that's had a lot of generational businesses.
Mm.
Multi-generational businesses. There's businesses that we work with that's third, fourth, fifth generation. And those the kids grew up in the business, the cousins grew up in the business, and so they don't know anything else. And they've probably. I'm not. I'm painting with a very broad brush, but it's reasonable to assume that they've never had a situation where they're worried about making a rent payment or a mortgage payment. That's not universally true, but if you're an employee, you certainly know that you've worked with people who have had that issue if you have it yourself. But yeah, it's a real benefit, I feel, to come out of that as an employee.
As we're beginning to wrap up here, one takeaway you'd like to leave listeners with? It could be either about buying a business or investing. Any takeaways you'd like to leave them with?
Yeah, I think it's important for everybody, and I kind of glossed over a few things, coming through a health issue. It wasn't a small health issue. I was supposed to have a heart transplant after COVID when I was 30. And that's kind of what spurred me to take an interest in actually achieving my dream of buying and owning and operating a business. I had wanted to do it for a few years before that and kind of just kept delaying. And if I'm going to leave something for anybody listening here, it's that we only have so much time, and you're doing yourself a disservice and cheating yourself if you're not actively pursuing something that you really, really want to do. If you can't, this is the first time in my life where I've been able to wake up and I think I could be doing this for the next 20, 30 years. I've never felt that before in any job I've had or anything I was doing. Now I feel like, even if I have a terrible day, my terrible days now, there's a lot more stress. There's certainly a lot more at risk, but I'll take my terrible days here versus what I was doing, some of my best days in previous roles any day of the week. And I think everybody deserves to have that experience. I really do want that for anybody listening. That's why I'm passionate about the fund, is because, yeah, it's great to raise capital, and it's great to have investments in all these businesses, but I care a lot about the entrepreneurs and the sponsors who are buying the businesses, because I know what a life-changing opportunity it is for a lot of these people.
Life changing opportunity. That is something, if you're listening, life changing opportunity is not something you often hear.
Mm-hmm.
So I would encourage you to think and really kind of ruminate on that. And so, Kevin, for people who are listening who want to know more about you, want to know more about Fruition Capital, where would you like them to go?
Easiest place. I'm pretty easy to find online. Not many people have my last name. So you can just go to Bibelhausen.com. You can find all my links to socials. You can find, newsletter, and then links to Fruition Capital are also on that site. But yeah, I mean, I'd love to hear from anybody who's interested in buying a business, interested in investing in business, interested in small business in general. And I'm sure your audience, full of marketers would be happy to kind of tap into this community too, because, we're always looking for more service providers and things like that to help our businesses grow.
I love it. So so everybody listening, we're going to drop all that in the show notes. Make sure you check it out. Definitely look at Kevin's info, Fruition Capital. Kevin, this has been a ball. I've had fun. I love the subject and the area. So this was a blast.
Yeah. Thank you, Eric.